ahead and I think get started. Like I said, a couple familiar faces. Welcome to our, I think, what is it, Janda? Our third EnviroHouse workshop. Third virtual EnviroHouse workshop. Obviously, it's been a bit of a strange spring and summer. Yeah, hooray! And you know, while we would love to be celebrating and having these EnviroHouse workshops in person at the EnviroHouse with all of you, unfortunately, we're not able to do so. So we've transitioned to hosting these workshops virtually here on Zoom. So many of you may be familiar. I know we at the City of Tacoma are very familiar with virtual workshops these last few months. But if this is your first Zoom workshop or first virtual meeting you've ever joined, welcome. I'm going to go over a couple of the quick technical logistics of how this is going to work. You may notice a little different than some Zoom meetings you may have joined in the past that we're actually hosting this as a Zoom webinar. So only Janda and Jenny, who we'll introduce here in just a moment, and myself, I'm Leah, are on video, and all of our attendees are either listening in on the phone or on their computer. We will have an opportunity later in the webinar to unmute you so you can ask some questions of either any of our panelists or you know, of any of us later at the end of the workshop. But for now, hopefully you can see us, you can hear us, and that's just a little bit of a different feature on how the webinar works. I do want to mention that this webinar is being recorded, so if you have to skip out or you missed something or you want to share with a friend, we'll be providing everybody that joined and everybody that registered for this workshop, we'll be sending you a link via email afterwards so you can share the video recording with whomever you would like. I also want to mention there's a couple of features on the Zoom webinar that are different than a regular Zoom meeting. Throughout this meeting, we're going to be doing some polls and Q&A. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you an example of what the poll will look like. But if you have a question at any time throughout the webinar, please hover over your screen and click that Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. That'll help us as panelists and Jenny and Janda keep track of any and all questions you might have. But it'll also allow you know, us to make sure that we answer all your questions, but also feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat. So you can either use the Q&A button or the chat to ask questions throughout. I'm going to invite Janda to maybe do a little few words of introduction now that we have a few more attendees, and then I'll show you a poll example. So I'm going to hand it over to Janda to do our introduction. Janda, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Janda, and I'm the EnviroHouse coordinator. And today's workshop, we will be covering herbs on growing and preserving. And Jenny Call, if you've been to any of our workshops, you may have seen Jenny before. She's done several workshops at the EnviroHouse. She's doing this for GardenSphere, but she's also a teacher and an educator and a farm girl, and she knows her plants very well. So we will be bringing Jenny on in a few minutes. You've met Leah, who's one of my sustainability colleagues in our Zoom mastermind. So she will be doing all the behind the scenes things. There will, as she mentioned, be a follow-up because it is being recorded, and so you'll get an email when this is over with information on how to get to the recording and the links and a PDF of the presentation, so you'll have all that information to refer to. Our next webinar will be July 16th on 4 to 5 p.m. on heat pump technology, air conditioning, cooling, heating that Tacoma Power will be bringing us. We will be doing another one probably in July on electric vehicles, and we are also doing a series of additional how-to videos. If you haven't seen those, you can go to YouTube and check on EnviroHouse how-to playlist. Jenny has done some of those. Hal will be doing some of those at the end of the month. And so there's quite a bit of information between the webinars and the how-tos. So thanks again for joining our virtual workshop. If you have suggestions on things that you'd like to see us do, please let us know. Our emails will be in the follow-up message that Leah will send out. So thanks, and participate.
Great. Thank you, Janda. And just before I hand it back over to Jenny to dive into all things garden herbs, I want to mention one quick thing that I just realized that I didn't mention at the beginning. If you're using the chat feature, by default, I believe it is, Zoom defaults so that all chats just go to panelists, which is fantastic if you just want myself and Janda and Jenny to see your message. But there's a little drop-down menu in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you want a chat, which I really encourage you to do, if you want your chat message to be seen by all attendees on this webinar, make sure you change that drop-down menu so that you're sending your chat message to all panelists and attendees. These workshops are such a great way to build community and swap ideas and brainstorm and share and kind of network. So we want to make sure that if you have things that are relevant and interesting to the whole group, make sure they can see it by changing that little drop-down menu. With that, right, again, last thing before we go over to Jenny, our last item of housekeeping, I mentioned polls. I just want to show you again, if this is your first Zoom webinar that you've ever joined, you may not be familiar with what these polls look like. So I'm going to go ahead and put a poll on your screen right now so you can see what it looks like. Here in just a moment, everybody should have seen a little poll pop up on your screen. And this is one, to show you an example of what these polls throughout Jenny's presentation will look like. But two, we're also kind of curious about what brought you here today. How did you hear about today's workshop? We're always trying to make sure, especially given this kind of strange and unique time, that people are able to access information about these workshops. And so we always want to know where we should focus our attention and our communication channels. So I'll leave this up here for about 10 or 15 more seconds. Thanks to everybody that's voted. We've got about 75% of people that have participated, so thank you. Leave it up here for 10 more seconds. Looks like most people heard about this either through Facebook or the EnviroNews email list. So I'm going to go ahead and close this with about 85% of people participating end poll. And another kind of neat feature is that now on your screen, you'll be able to see in real time the results of today's poll. So I know Jenny put together some kind of fun poll questions today related to herbs and your experience with herbs. So keep an eye out for these on your screen throughout the presentation. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this and close the poll. And I think, unless there's anything else, that I will hand it over to Jenny to maybe, again, say, I know Janda introduced you, but say who you are and dive right in.
All right. Well, I am Jenny Call, and I am affiliated with GardenSphere. It's like a job that I absolutely love. I grew up in the Puyallup Valley, and so I grew up around farming, sustainable agriculture. My dad was huge into, making sure we're growing organically. I've got my own farm. I just have a lot of experience. I'm super passionate about all things plants, and I do some animal husbandry as well. So I'm really excited to do this webinar for you today. I am going to be switching up my screen to share with you, and we'll go through some slides, and I'll kind of talk you through it. At the very end, I'll have at the very end of the drying portion, because we're going to do a growing portion and then we're going to do a drying portion. And so at the very end, I do have a smattering of herbs and some that are hanging. You can see a few behind me hanging up. That we'll do a couple samples on like how to snip a couple of varieties of herbs and get them prepared. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Da-da-da. And I've got to go. All right. So again, we're going to start out with growing herbs. So there's all types of herbs you can grow. It's like a smorgasbord of things you can do with herbs. So getting into herbs is one of the easiest ways and simplest ways to get into gardening in a way that isn't stressful. Because gardening can be really, really stressful if you're focused on the annuals, planting the seeds and getting all that going. But if you are just starting out in gardening, herbs are the most fantastic way to do it. Most herbs are going to be drought tolerant, so you're not going to have to water them as frequently. A huge number of herbs are perennials. That means that they are herbs that will come back year after year. So you're saving a little money on that. Super useful. So you've got the culinary purposes. You have fragrant aromatherapy purposes. You can make teas out of them. It's really cool. The different varieties of herbs and their uses. They are also, when you let them flower out, are a wonderful way to add to a pollinator garden, for the pollinators to add to your garden, to help them feed our native bees and our native flies. Plus, most of them look really beautiful. You know, they don't just look beautiful, but they smell fantastic. So if you have herbs in your yard, you know, like for me, I go through my yard, I've got rosemary and I've got lemon balm and I've got all kinds of smell. I've got sage, you know, and I'll just walk by and I'll touch the fronds, you know, and then just kind of rub it on myself so then I smell like the herb. So, I mean, there's so many uses of herbs, and they're just so easy to grow, you know, and it's a great way to get into gardening. Here's the first poll question.
Yay! Time for a poll. Look at that eye-catching. So before we even get into the meat of Jenny's presentation,
I know.
I think Jenny would like to know. Let's see here. Have you ever grown herbs before? Anybody on this call? Have you ever grown them before? And you'll notice there are 2 yes questions, because at least for me, a few times it's like, yes, they've turned out great. And also other times, yes, I've grown them, but grow is, you know, that's a loose term because they didn't thrive or survive. So yes, I technically grew them, but they didn't do so well. So it looks like we're going to leave this up here for another maybe 15 or 20 seconds. We've got about half of people participating in this poll so far. A lot of people saying yes, they turned out great, which I think speaks, Jenny, to what you just said with the ease of growing herbs. They're oftentimes a really good first step into gardening. If you've never grown anything before, they can be.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So let's give this maybe 5 or 10 more seconds, and then we'll share this with everybody. Interesting. Some people have never grown herbs before. Ooh, somebody said other in the chat. Somebody said yes. George says he did, but he did not grow them very well. So let's go ahead and end this poll, and I'll share the results. Jenny, looks like most people on the webinar say yes, they turned out great, but a few others said didn't do so well, or no, they've never grown them, or like George, didn't use them very well. I know I'm guilty of that in my garden. I had lots and lots and lots of oregano and thyme last year, and I don't think I put them in anything. So
yeah, and that happens. That does happen. That happens very, very frequently.
All right. Thanks everybody for participating. We'll hand it back over to Jenny.
Yeah, that's great. It's neat to see those answers. There are some requirements for success. So for those of you who grew them, but it wasn't as successful as you wanted them to be, most herbs are going to need full sun. That means at least a minimum of like 9 to 10 hours. There are a few herbs that'll take about 4 hours, but most of them are going to need like a lot of sun because they like that heat, you know? So you're going to have to figure out, you know, are you placing it maybe in the south facing area of your yard? Are you placing it in a spot that is north-south? A lot of times folks will place plants east-west, but with the sun going over, what happens is that they get that really fantastic, if you place it in the east, it gets really fantastic morning sun and it comes up, and then at some point on the day, depending on how many trees you have and things like that, it loses it and it starts getting shaded out, and so then it goes down in the west, and then you get that really hot sun in the afternoon coming from the west, and then it sets down. So if you can think north south planting, starting with your most southern area, and then so south for me is this way and north is that way, so starting in your most southern spot and then planting accordingly, planting more towards, if you can and you know that it's an herb that's a little bit more delicate, you're going to plant it more southwesterly. Southeasterly. And if it can take that hot sun, like rosemary, I mean, it's like a champion of the hot sun, being drought tolerant. Totally southwesterly is going to be where you're going to want to plant that. The soil is going to have to be very well draining. With most plants and herbs are the same way. If the roots don't have the water draining from those root systems, you're going to have stunted roots. If it's super hard clay, they're not going to be able to successfully grow out. And you'll also see that stunting. If the roots are stunted, you're going to see the stunting on the top part of the plant as well. If it has too much sand and the water just goes right through so fast, you're going to be watering more frequently. And if you miss a watering, the likelihood of that plant drying out and the root systems drying out and dying, you'll see it in the top end just as well. So you're going to want to have a good mix. You can use, say, the Gardener in Bloom Harvest Supreme. Say if you have the, a little bit more of a clay soil, even with the real sandy soil, because of that compost, it has a lot of robust material and it'll hold that water in. But not only with the clay, it'll also help break that clay up. So, making sure it's very well drained is going to be super important. Depending on your herb, having at least 6 inches to 3 feet of soil space. That means you've got your plant here, here's above, here's the greenery, but then below it's got its roots. And so you're going to want to have at least 6 inches to 3 feet depending on the plant. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Like our annuals, the cilantros and the basils and the dills, they really only need about 6 inches. But when you get to like sage or the rosemaries, the lavenders, they're going to want to have a deeper soil system, which makes them so drought tolerant because they're getting that water from deeper down in the ground. So we'll there's a few others. Mint, I would say you're going to need at least 12 to 18 inches because mint really likes to creep along and spreads really awesome if it's not in a pot. And so that root system, you're going to need at least 12 to 18 inches for mint, any kind of mint, even peppermint. So the other thing you have to think about, are you going to put it in a pot? Or is it going to be in a raised bed, or is it going to be just in the ground? And in all those cases, you're still going to need that really well draining soil. You're still going to have to think of the root depth, the soil depth, and the roots. How far you want the roots to go down. And you're going to have access for those plants weekly if they're in pots. It's raised beds once they're established, depending on what is on the ground before you built your raised bed, you're gonna have less watering. But in pots, it is going to be more frequent when we get into our summer months. Now, when should you start getting those herbs? Bringing them into your yard, buying them, looking for them? I would say think about what you want to do. Plan it all out. This is what winter is for. Winter is for planning. So that when you get to March, April, May, you can start figuring that all out, right? Laying out your raised beds, or really getting the ground prepared if you're putting it in the ground, buying those pots, buying that potting soil, purchasing the fertilizers, any amendments you need if you're putting them in the ground. And then May, end of April, May is perfect time to plant, okay? Normally the soil is pretty saturated from April. May tends to be a warmer month overall. And so May, because it is a little bit warmer, but that soil is saturated with water if you're planting in the ground or the raised beds, and you've built those raised beds, a lot of rains happen, so it's nice and saturated. Those roots are going to be able to establish themselves before, say, we get into the hot July and August weather. Now, I know today is July 1st, and then we're looking outside, and it is a little bit gray and gloomy, kind of reminds us of April. But, once it starts kicking in, we get Washington, we always say after the 4th of July, that's when our summer starts. So, you know, then we get into that hot weather, and the roots can get really stressed out. So May and June are absolutely the perfect temperature-wise and soil temperature-wise to plant your herbs, okay? Most herbs are going to be available, you know, March through about July. July is when we start thinking about fall plantings, like our bulbs, and there's a couple, you know, there's a smattering of vegetables you can plant seeds for in July. So really, your March through July in the nurseries, what you're going to find, you're going to be able to find those starts readily available and the seeds readily available. And there's a couple like rosemary. Rosemary is a really good one, and sage. Sage is another one. It can be found year round because it's an evergreen, so it is going to stay beautiful all year round. So you've got kind of just really a handful that you can buy year round. So think January, February, you're planning, you're prepping, you're making your lists, you're buying your supplies. Maybe March, you're building your beds because we have a little bit nicer weather. It's not as chilly outside. April, buying all your herbs, maybe getting some seed, things like that. And then by the end of June, having everything planted, okay? So if you are doing it in June, just think of if you were doing it towards the end of June, you are going to want, and you find that the temperatures are a little bit warmer, say 75 or higher, you are going to want to pick, say, in the morning before 10 o'clock, or in the late afternoon after 5 o'clock. If you plant in the middle of the day and it's right in that hot sun, your herbs are going to go, oh my gosh, this is too stressful, because they've just been, you know, either taken out of their pot or something, and now they're planted in a new spot and the sun is beating on them. If you plant it early in the day or later in the day, it's not as much of a shock, and you won't see wilt happening and things like that when you do plant your herbs. And it's, again, that mild temperature that really helps.
Jenny, this is Leah real quick. We have one, I just don't want to forget it.
Oh, yeah, question.
We'll touch on this later. We do have a question about slugs, so I don't know if you're going to touch on this later in here, but Cindy specifically asked what to do about slugs. Yeah. So we can either talk about it now, or if there's another that's better. Absolutely.
We're in indoor, outdoor, so this is perfect.
Perfect.
So slugs. Yes, we have a lot of slugs this year. I am seeing a huge number of slugs this year. It's because we didn't have a hard winter. We didn't have that snow and the cold like we did last year. And so slugs, really, you can do a couple things. So you can use Sluggo, which is pet friendly. It's basically, it's a pasta base, and what it does when the slug eats it, it expands in the slug, and they kind of explode internally. It's kind of gross and brutal. But if you're safe, you have chickens or dogs or cats or guinea pigs are outside, I don't know, whatever you have outside, maybe rabbits come into your yard, they can all eat it, and they're not going to get sick because it's not a poison. I know my chickens come around, and they if any of the Sluggo gets on the edges of the fenced garden area, I know they're like, score, snack. So but the slugs, it will take care of the slugs. If we have heavy rains, it will last through those heavy rains 3, 4, 5 days maybe at the max. So you'll have to reapply. If it's dry outside, it will stick around for as long as it stays dry outside. I know that some folks use beer traps, so they'll put a cup in sideways and tilt it down like a plastic cup or a small paper cup or something, you know, something they can put in and keep the beer at the bottom, and the slugs go in there and they drink that, and they actually drown. So they get in there, and if you fill it up enough, they'll take a drink, and then they'll slide in, and then they'll drown in there. Some folks use the copper. There's a copper banding. You can get it. It kind of looks like a roll of copper tape. And some people use the copper tape around their garden edges. You wouldn't do it around each plant unless, say, you've got one plant and it's solitary all by itself, but you would use it around your garden bed, and it shocks them. Which is kind of weird, but it is effective in some yards. there, you know, but I really, you know, you could use deadline and things like that, but those again, if eaten by any other animals, it will make them very, very, very sick. So, so Sluggo is about as product heavy as I ever go, because I know that if any animal eats it, they're going to be fine. It's basically like eating a snack. So, but those are some suggestions. I know that there are lots of other, you know, I know online you can find tons and tons of remedies and things like that. But those are probably my top 3 in the order of success. So that would be Sluggo, and then trapping them with beer. It's so funny. It always works. And then that copper band around the outside of your garden bed. That was a good question.
Thank you, Jenny. If anybody in this call joined our natural yard care webinar last week, my first concern was, well, are slugs partial to IPAs or porters or pilsners? But I got the impression that it really doesn't matter, and they're not too picky. So I'm glad you brought up the beer remedy as well, because that came up last week. So thank you. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, they're not partial. They'll take any of the beer. So when we're thinking about indoor and out versus outdoor, so many people think you can grow herbs indoors, and there is really there is some truth to that, right? There is some truth to that, but most herbs, they really want to be outside in that full sun. Unless indoors you have an actual grow light that you can hang and a grow light, not like a light from a lamp or something, but an actual grow light. And those are specific growing bulbs. And they also have the LED ones as well, and they have fluorescent ones as well. A lot of times you're going to find the fluorescent and the LED, but they do have the screw-in type, you know, that kind of bulb as well, where you can stick it into a hood and then shine it on your plants. If you do it indoors, that really is the best way to do it, because they need that full sun. And the reason is because if they don't have that full sun, that 8 to 10 hours of sun every day, you're going to find the leaves and the greenery on your herbs are going to start becoming very, very thin. Kind of like tissue paper thin, and they're going to become very, very tender, and they're not trapping the oils as much, so the flavor is going to go down over time. The strength of the plant and the fibers of the plant, that is going to diminish over time, and their life cycle just ends up being significantly cut short. But you know, in the winter time, the parsleys and the cilantros, basil, dill, even you can get little tiny baby dills you want to cut off for salads in the winter time. Chives will grow indoors, but again, their lifespan is going to be cut quite short. Now, cilantro and parsley and basil, you can throw those in. Those are real easy to grow from seed, so that's why they might be a good choice in the winter time, just to have that fresh flavor. And chives, very easy to grow from seed. So those are 4 you could grow inside during the winter time. Just know that their lifespan is going to be very, very short. Rosemary, lemon balm, lemon verbena, oregano, though, sage. There's a whole host of lemongrass herbs that they just won't have the strong, potent flavor that you're looking for, and the whole makeup, their cell walls, everything will just be diminished. So you really want to put them outside. And they just get really huge too. I mean, I saw rosemary one time, it was growing outside and it was 4 feet tall. So, some of these herbs, they need that temperature changing. They need the room to really be at their best. And like the sages and the rosemarys, lavenders, they need that temperature change. They need to be, they need to get into that freezing temperature so they can. It's as if it's a reset within within the plant, and all the energy goes into those roots and growing the root systems and strengthening those root systems, so that when they come back in the spring, it's like they come back and they're just flourishing. So they really do need that. Plus, you don't have any mess. Outdoors is great. You can make a huge mess when you're potting and planting, and especially if it's you know, in the ground, you can make a giant mess. Bugs can be there, all kinds of craziness can happen, and it's not happening in your kitchen, you know, or maybe you have other things going on. You don't have a cat pushing them off the counter, or any other critters trying to get your herbs. So outdoors is the ideal situation for herbs, but again, there's that smattering of herbs that you can grow indoors too.
Thanks, Jenny. I do have another question that's come in.
Great.
I think this is our attendee's name. I think this is their device name, but it's
Okay.
Pixel 2 would like to know, so I'm just going to call them Pixel. Pixel would like to know, is there any, and maybe again you'll touch on this later, but they would like to know, are there any herbs not to grow next to some other plant or herb? So maybe kind of that companion growing, any herbs that are not so ideal to grow next to others, or either herbs that grow well together, or maybe herbs that don't grow well together.
Yeah. I always recommend, if you're going to do herbs, try to keep the perennials together, and keep the perennials, meaning that they're going to be there all year round, and the annuals together, meaning that they're going to die back every year and you're going to have to reseed it. For the most part, most of the perennials, they grow quite well together. You know, like oregano and thyme, you know, they stay quite low. So then when you've got sage and you've got rosemary, they get quite tall. You could put down, you know, really nice ground cover. You see you've got this really low, and then you've got a medium, and you've got a high. Beautiful landscaping with the herbs, with the perennials. And I do say this, keeping the annuals separate, because you're going to be digging in that soil. I mean, you're going to be, no matter what, the pots, whatever, you're going to be digging in there. And every time you disrupt the root systems, it's a little bit of stress on the plants. So annuals, you're going to disrupt those root systems anyway, because they're going to end up dying off, and you're going to end up cleaning out your pot or the raised bed or the ground area that you've planted them in. And it's not going to matter. But, you know, keeping those perennials together, because you know that you're not going to touch those plants, and you're not going to touch the root systems, so they don't get all weird and stressed out about, you know, their roots being moved around and cut on accident or anything like that. That was a good question. Oh, anything with lemon, a lemon flavor or scent is really great to grow near, say, where you're having a fire pit, or where you're barbecuing, or where you're sitting out, because it'll keep our little friends, the mosquitoes, away while you're sitting out there enjoying a really warm evening too. So how to start growing herbs? So a couple different ways. So you can do them from seed, or you can do them from plant. Growing it from seed, I would say chamomile, you've got dill, we have chives, parsley, cilantro, basil. Those all do really well from seed. Okay, they're going to be easy going. Chamomile, super easy to grow from seed, right? You just get a bunch of seed, throw it in there, right? You just kind of nurture it, right? It's an inexpensive way to get some herbs grown in your yard, because, you know, you'll get a packet of them, and, you know, they'll be like 50 or 100 or 200 in a packet, right? And you spend, say, $2.50 or $1.99 or something on the seed packet. So you get a lot of seeds, a big bang for your buck, right? You can find the seeds, you know, all the time. You can go online, you can go Ed Hume, or say Johnny Seeds, or Territorial, and you can buy those seeds online. Or, you know, if you go to different various nurseries, you can buy seeds at Fred Meyer, you can buy seeds at the feed stores. So there's lots of places you can get seeds, right? But they do require more time. So with, say, basil, that's something you would have to seed indoors and then put them out, say, in May, at the end of May, beginning of June. So you have to think of the time constraints or requirements for each plant for them to go all the way to maturity, where you can just use them and enjoy them, right? And most of these, you know, with like basil, maybe you only want one or two plants. So you've got a whole packet of seeds. But on the flip side of that, you you have lots of opportunities to, if you have challenges while you're growing the seed, you have tons of opportunities to keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, right? Now, with the plants, they're going to be seasonally available, except maybe your rosemaries, your sages, right? Or sometimes lavender you can get too if it's left over from the season and it's out in the nursery. Most times lavender is harder to find because it's it's a hot commodity, but they're going to be seasonally available March through about July, end of July, maybe end of July. They're going to come in 4-inch pots, and they are they're going to be really easy to grow. They're already established. They've got a fantastic root system. There's going to be, you're going to be able to look at the tags and you're going to be able to go, oh yeah, this is this variety. You know, you've got, say the Reuben basil, purple basil, or you have Greek oregano instead of just your standard oregano. And some herbs are only available as plants. So again, mint, you're only going to find it as a plant. It's just the way it is. It's terribly difficult to grow from seed. You're going to find rosemary is going to come as a plant. Your lavenders, your sages, your bay laurels. Most of the time, you're going to find oregano mostly as a plant. You can get the oregano seed, but the plant again is going to be much easier just to start with. It's kind of like you're giving yourself a boost of confidence because you're already starting with like this great plant who has an established root system, beautiful greenery. It's ready to go. You just have to pop it in the ground. So, I mean, there's benefits and drawbacks to both using seed or plant. But again, just keep in mind that there are some plants that you can't get the seeds to grow them. And if you're a super novice, like you've never grown anything and like you don't even do house plants, I would definitely start with a plant. You're just going to be way more successful. Now, there's a difference between an annual and a perennial. So an annual will die back every year. And you'll either have to buy a brand new plant in a 4-inch pot, or you are going to have to plant it from seed every year. Now, a perennial is something that sticks around, right? It's going to come back every year. So you have your woody evergreen perennials, you have your soft herbaceous perennials, but they're going to come back. They're going to seed themselves, or they're going to establish themselves in a spot. So they're great to have as far as picking a spot that you really want color every year and not have to worry about it. Some common annuals, again, I've talked about this. We've got basil, cilantro, lemon verbena, lemongrass. We've got sometimes, so parsley is kind of on the fence. So parsley, if you get flat leaf parsley, depending on how our winter goes, and depending on whether it seeds itself, you could think of it as an annual or a perennial. It can go either way. Lemon verbena, if we've had a mild winter, lemon verbena is going to come back if we've had a mild winter. Now, if we have had a very hard winter, or if it's dropped below 30 degrees, that lemon verbena is not coming back. It's just kind of one of those things that just doesn't come back. With the lemongrass, we just don't have hot enough. Again, it's all about temperature. We don't have the warm soil temperatures to keep lemongrass growing. It's just not going to happen here. But every year it's totally available and easy to get. The perennials, again, are going to come back year after year. If you're looking for herbs for landscaping, you're going to go for those perennials. Poll time.
Well, I was on mute. You couldn't hear me, but I was doing a drum roll for the next poll.
Nice.
Jenny, remind me, we're doing the where you're growing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, we want to know, folks, where will you grow your herbs, or I suppose, where are you growing your herbs? So here in a moment, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. So where do you plan to grow your herbs? Could be more than one place. I know at my house, I'm growing herbs in a container, but also in my raised beds. And I think my husband planted a lone, I think it was lavender, somewhere out in our yard that I'm still a little unsure as to where exactly it is. So I guess I would three. But let's see. We'll leave this up here for 10 more seconds or so. In the meantime, I'll mention that George says he just ordered lemongrass and 8 stalks arrived. 1 started rooting in water and I planted it. He says I could have gone to the Asian market and purchased the same thing in veggies. So I guess maybe a little bit of a non-nursery, non-traditional place to buy your herbs and plant them. I know I always see in the grocery store there you can buy that live basil plant.
Yeah, yep.
You can buy those kind of herbs.
Yeah, as long as they don't have their, too much of their root system cut off, like you can do that with quite a few. The lemongrass especially, like if it still has part of its root system there, you could totally do it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, looks like our results are in. About 90% of people participated. Most people, 89%, say, at least, it was multiple choice, but they're growing in a container or a pot, followed by in the ground, and then raised beds, pretty close. And then,
wow.
At least a couple people said their answers in the chat, so it must have been George. But yeah, if you're growing your herbs in any other non-traditional or interesting ways or places, please put it in the chat and share your ideas and let us know how it's going. So most say container or a pot.
Great. That's really great. I know that growing in water is becoming much more popular. So I can totally see that happening. So we really do have a couple of choices. You could do hydroponics, that's the guy growing in water. Or you could do the easy it takes a little bit more to do that, but again, like if you find something in the grocery store, the Asian market, or something like that, it still has a root system there. You could totally put it in a glass of water. Just make sure those roots are wet and the greenery stays nice and dry. The most common ways to do it is to either have them in pots, raised beds, or in the ground. Now, if you're doing them in pots or raised beds, it's basically the same situation. So you're going to be using potting or raised bed mix. Now you can use the raised bed mix also in your pots. So a lot of times you can get the raised bed mix. I know Gardener and Bloom has a raised bed mix, and it comes in a compressed cube, and so that compressed cube is super easy to then put some in your pots and things like that. You're going to need a vegetable or herb fertilizer handy, because you are going to have to fertilize through the growing months. And then a watering can so that you can water out, unless you're just using your hose. But just know you're going to be watering them in your raised beds or your pots probably about 2 to 3 times a week, depending on our weather, of course. So the hotter it is, the more frequent. The wetter we are, the more rain we have, the less frequent. Because I think I watered more in May than I did in June, that's for sure. You are going to want to fertilize monthly, though, starting in April and ending in September. September is when they're starting to shut down their plant selves, and then all the energy is going to start going into that root system. So you don't have to worry about fertilizing after September. If you're in the ground and you're super curious, you could get a little tester. So the tester will tell you what you might need. Do you need more calcium in your soil? Do you need more nitrogen? Do you need more potassium? Do you need more, a whole bunch of range of things that you might need in your soil. And so if you're feeling really, really investigative, go ahead and get one of those samplers, what your composition is. Most of the herbs are going to be just fine in what we have in the ground, unless you're sitting on fill. And fills, if you're sitting on, if your home was built on fill, then you're definitely going to want to make sure we put a blended compost in there, put a little fertilizer in there, really get it prepped before you plant. And again, roughly about once a week, April to September, you're going to have to give it a good water. And that's really in the first season that you have that plant in the ground, because when you're planting in the ground, most of the time it's a perennial. If it's an annual, you are going to probably have to follow the watering regimen of the pots in the raised bed if it's an annual that you're planting in the ground. But if it's a perennial that you're planting in the ground, it's really that first year they're going to need a lot of water. And after that, you know, in the hot months, you know, we have a string of 4 or 5 days that are 75 degrees or hotter. You're probably going to have to give it a drink, but it should be easy to manage. Also in the ground, if it's a perennial, then you're only going to really need to fertilize it early in the season. You know, April, May, give it a hit of fertilizer. Try not to fertilize it in the fall. That's when the greenery is starting to go and diminish, and unless you have, like, you know, the rosemary and things like that, but still most of their energy is going to go into the ground, and so their root systems are working overtime down there. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. Either way, you know, it's going to be fantastic. So we've got 3 different types of herbs that most people are familiar with. So we've got our evergreens. They're going to stick around. They're going to be beautiful year round. They're going to be fragrant year round. So when we're in the middle of winter and it's gray and it's cloudy and gross outside, you can still go right up to that, you know, lavender, and touch it and smell it, and it will boost your spirits. So we've got our rosemary, sage, lavender, and I put an asterisk for oregano because it is a semi-evergreen. It will lose some of its leaves, but it will keep some of its leaves as well. So it's more of a semi-evergreen. Time will stick around. The bay laurel is fantastic. You know, eventually it turns into a giant tree. If you ever get a chance to go up to Urban Tilth up in Seattle, they have a 25, 30-foot tall bay laurel tree, and is absolutely gorgeous. So they can get really big if they're planted in the ground and then nurtured. Our herbaceous herbs are chamomile. We have mints, all of the mints, the herbaceous perennial, parsley, lemon balm, borage, oregano. Again, oregano is that semi-evergreen, fennel, chives, catnip, marjoram, tarragon. All of those, they're going to die back every year. So they will disappear when we get that first hard frost, and you won't see them again until early probably mid-spring-ish, depending on our temps. And then we have our annuals. We've got our basils and our cilantros, lemongrass, lemon verbena, and dill. Really great ones to do, but those are annuals that they will die back every single year. All right. I'm going to kind of take a pause, and if there are any questions about growing herbs, we can totally take some questions about growing herbs if you'd like, or I can go ahead and I can keep trekking through drying and preserving.
Well, I just want to mention Matthew had a great idea in the chat. He talks about growing in a vertical garden to maximize small space. So that's something I've seen a lot, I don't know, in recent years. Maybe it's always been a thing, but great idea for an apartment dweller or a small space, and, you know, probably not ideal to grow it in the ground or a bed, but do it with what you can. I do have a question about specifically mint. So I'm visiting my in-laws, and they talk about the mint in their backyard and how it just grows like crazy, and it just grows everywhere, and it's goes all over the place. Are there herbs, mint or otherwise, is that harmful to other plants, or is it okay to let your mint or your herbs kind of go nuts? It's just kind of up to you.
So mint is one of those, if you don't want it to travel, stick it in a pot. Because mint, what happens is it grows by rhizome, and so underground it starts traveling. And so if you have planted mint in one spot specifically, after about a year or two, that mint, the center of that plant, is going to disappear, and you're going to find that mint is going to slowly creep outwards, and it's going to travel, and it will take over complete areas of yard that you may not want it to do. Lemon balm is another one. Lemon balm is another one it likes to travel. Also, the seeds in lemon balm are very prolific. So they will seed themselves, and they will spread like wildfire. Most of the other herbs, chamomile, if you let it go to seed and then you forget that you let it go to seed, the birds will travel that one for you. They like those seeds, so the birds will take that all over. Borage, really, if you do plant borage, plant it in a spot where you don't mind it expanding, but about every 2 to 3 years, you're going to want to dig out those root systems and tie it back in, and then maybe give away the roots of the borage, because that is a spreader as well. Mint is great in a pot. Just to go back to the vertical, if you do vertical gardening, you really have to be aware that the water is going to really, really be heavy at the bottom, because it's going to be dripping and moving downwards. So planting annuals is your best bet, and doing basil on the bottom. Or say do mint on the bottom, because mint doesn't care about being in a smaller pot or a smaller space. And a lot of vertical gardens, they have a real small root system area for the soil depth and everything. Mint doesn't care, so having mint on the bottom or having basil on the bottom, a plant that really likes water, because basil loves water, right? It's like a tomato. That's why they're so great together. They have the same water needs. And thinking about having your drier herbs as you go up. So, your cilantros and your chives aren't necessarily going to need as much water as the basils. So if you do vertical gardening with the herbs, rosemary is not going to make it. Sage isn't going to make it. Lavender is not going to make it. But what will is thyme. The oregano will do okay. After a while, the oregano will die out because it'll get stunted. But it will do well for up to about 5 years in a smaller vertical space. Any of the annuals will do fantastic, because again, they die back at the end of the year anyway. So they're not bound and continually growing and expanding. So just think about your water usage when you're doing the vertical gardening, because that's where the rot and stuff happens, and people get really discouraged because they're like, everything's going, at the bottom, everything's rotting, and everything's dry on top. So you just got to kind of be aware of that, unless you have like a way to siphon the water up and around. Which there are lots of ways to do that, especially with like hydroponic tools and things like that. So
yeah, elaborate engineering for sure.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
You have a lot to cover, I think, on drying and preserving. So there's one more comment that's a good segue, not so much a question that needs to be.
Oh, great. Yes.
Talk a little bit about plants that bolt, or go to seed, like you said, like cilantro, for example, and talking about how to minimize or reduce that by cutting to use dry or freeze, which, like I said, may be a good segue of going into your next section. And I do want to keep us moving along, be mindful of time. I want to say to all attendees, we'll be here as long as it takes to go through all this. So the schedule here, but we'll keep moving along and talking about drying and preserving herbs.
All right, here we go. So here's the first poll question.
Oh, perfect. One more poll here, and this is specific to drying and preserving herbs. So very similar to our last poll that we did, similar to the growing question. Have you ever dried or preserved herbs before? Kind of similar, like, yes, they were great. Or in my case, I tried, but they didn't turn out. Or no, I've never tried drying or preserving herbs. Or other, maybe you have some other experiment that you tried. So please let us know in the chat. Leave that up there for a few more seconds. We've got about half of our attendees have participated. I know, and you're probably going to touch on this, I'm always curious how long drying and preserved herbs can last. Last year I had a ton of basil and I think oregano that I dried, and I came across it in my pantry like 6 months later, and I thought, is this still good? I don't even know if this is good. I tried it anyway. It was fine, but anyway, so how long preserving will go. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Oh, couple more people participating. 5, 4, 3, 2. Ta-da! All right. What people said. Looks like pretty close. So, but just so people said yes, they turned out great, but also a fair number of folks said no, they've never tried. And a couple saying that they tried but didn't turn out. So what a good segue into learning out the proper ways to do that. So I'll go ahead and drop this and remove our poll. Take it away, Jenny.
Great. So the first part is harvesting the leaves, if you're thinking about herbs. So you're going to want to harvest in the morning before 10 a.m. again, because of the heat, because of the temperature. A lot of herbs are going to start to wilt, especially the softer, like the lemon balm and the mints. the heat gets the oils in the herbs moving around and going out and expanding. And so you really want the oils in the herbs to really be concentrated. You don't want them moving around with the heat, just like any oils. So, so you want to do it in the morning. You do it before they flower or they bolt. And bolting means you're generally going to get a nice hard stalk in the center of a plant part, and it's going to be very woody, and it's going to get taller than the plant itself, and then it'll flower out. You are going to need to have a sharp, clean tool. So very sharp scissors or pruners, something like that, depending on if it's very woody or if it's very herbaceous. You're going to cut the full stem of the herb. That's going to be very important, because the more you handle the herbs, the more it's going to end up being that some are going to get bruised and it won't dry correctly, things like that. You're going to very, very gently wash the herbs. Now, if there's not a whole lot on them, you can brush them very gently or blow on them, but you don't want to bruise any of the material. You're going to let all the excess moisture, you're going to give it maybe a little shake, or just damp it down just a little bit with a paper towel or a regular towel, and then remove all that extra moisture. And then you're going to let it air dry. Very important to let it air dry completely. You don't want any molds growing and gross, it just becomes really a huge mess. So you don't want to let that stuff grow in there. Let it air dry. When you're harvesting the flowers, say with chamomile or with lavender, you can harvest the flowers of sage, of borage. There's a whole host. Again, you're going to harvest in the morning, use a clean, sharp tool. You're going to clip the whole stem with the flowers or the whole head of the flower. Just gently shake and blow off any insects or any debris on there, any soil or any of that. And then you're going to tie the stems up, and you're going to make them very small bundles. And then the heads, if they're stems, and you're going to dry them upside down. So you want to make sure you're bundling them in a way that they're not going to be super tight, because you don't want the center of that bundle to get, again, you don't want it to mildew or mold. And then if they're heads, you're going to lie them nice and flat on a paper towel, and then just put a separate paper towel on top. It's going to keep them really dry. There's a bunch of different ways you can dry. So if you're drying the leaves, you're going to want to put them somewhere where they can be laying out flat. The leaves aren't going to be touching each other. You're not having one leaf on top of another leaf. You really want to make sure those leaves are not going to be touching side by side or touching on top of each other. And they have to be completely dry before you store them. So, I mean, you can see I've got the plastic dehydrator. There's the super, stainless steel dehydrator. You can put it on a drying rack, a dish rack even, and put it on there. We've got a solar dehydrator. I like to put them in the refrigerator. Not in the crisper, because the crisper holds moisture, but putting them in between two layers of paper towels and putting them in the refrigerator dries out mint, especially, just like super amazing. It's the fastest way to do it. So when you're drying the leaves, you really want to make sure they're super, super dry before you bottle them up. Now, again, if you're drying the flowers, they're going to be hung upside down, and you're going to want to put them in a very dark, cool place. If you want to keep dust and things off of them, you're going to want to put a bag over the flowers. Because you can see some straw flower there, because it'll keep the dust off them, especially if you are using them as a decoration later. You're going to make those bouquets of flowers. If you're using them as a decoration, you want to make the bouquet exactly how you want to see it when you put it in the vase when it's dry, because it is very difficult to arrange dried flowers, because they are dry and brittle by the time you arrange them. And so you want to make sure you arrange them. If you're using the flowers, say the lavender or the sage or the chamomile, it's not going to necessarily matter as much because you're really looking for those heads. But again, you're going to hang them upside down, or you're going to put them in a dry paper bag if there's the heads, once they're all the heads have sat out a little bit. And then you're just going to leave them alone. You're not even going to touch them until they're fully dried. It's drying herbs and preserving them is really quite easy. And then you want to think about the end process, right? So in most cases, you're going to end up finding you want to put them in a jar. Those jars, I am super hoping they're going in a dark cupboard because light does affect the longevity of that dried herb. They are going to be, say, if they were just left out like that or in the light, in a clear jar, you're only going to be able to use them and they have their full potency 4 to 6 months. I would think more, I would go closer to maybe 4 months full potency, and then they start degrading and losing their potency after that. If you do use jars and you know they're going to be set out, put them in a jar that's colored or shaded. There's lots of really cool ways to do that. And that way the light is not degrading those leaves. For the leaves, you're going to slide off all of those leaves. There's a couple different ways to do that. And they're going to be fully dry. Okay. Again, I cannot emphasize that more, because if there's any moisture in there at all, it will ruin the leaves out, and you'll find mold in there. Leave them whole. Don't break those leaves down, because what happens is when you crush the leaves, then you're letting all those oils out, right? You're breaking down those flavonoids. So you want to keep them as whole as possible, so that when you go to use them, then you break them up into whatever you're doing, and you're releasing that flavor, you're releasing those oils. And then make sure it's super tight. You can vacuum pack them. You can stick in, you can tight lid. You can stick in those dry pods. There's like you find in other products, that want to stay nice and dry. You'll find those. It tends to work really well. And the flowers, you're just going to remove. If you're just using the bouquet and the bouquet has been hanging upside down, you're ready to go. You can just stick it in a vase and call it good, and then you've got some really beautiful flowers to look at until the next season when you grow more. If you are using those petals or the heads of the flowers, again, it's the same thing. You're just going to remove those petals or the heads. You're going to keep them as whole as possible. You're going to store it in a jar. Again, if the jar has to be out of a dark place, then make sure the jar or a receptacle, whatever you're putting it in, it has got some coloring to it or has some shading to it, so it's not clear for that. And then you can just use them whenever you need to use them, right? So like with chamomile, you would keep the whole heads, and then when you go to make your tea, you would just break down those heads just a smidge before you make your tea, and you're ready to go. So I am going to see if you have any questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see a couple examples as well. Drying and preserving is pretty fast. I know we also didn't talk about using the freezer. You can put fresh herbs in olive oil, put them in your ice cubes and save them that way. Because once they're in the ice cube form, you can, once they're in ice cube form, then you can use them in anything. You can keep them in a Ziploc bag and you've got all your little ice cubes. Maybe you want an Italian mix, and so you put in oregano and basil, and you put a bunch of things in that one ice cube and throw it in, and now you've got your olive oil and you've got your herbs all together, and you can just cook with it readily. It's such a cool thing. So yeah, freezing it's a great idea. You also have the fresh herbs. You can preserve them in any other type of oil that you would like in a jar itself, or put them in, if you want to make a kind of like a tincture or something, then you would put them in alcohol, right? Drinking alcohol, not rubbing alcohol. There's a difference.
Distinction.
Yeah, totally different. But so you can do that. You can put the herbs in there, and then they get their potency, and then you have your little tincture for whatever purpose you need. So, but the olive oil one in the freezer is it's fantastic because it's so great to cook with like soups, and you're making things in the wintertime, and you have these herbs that are there, and it's like, oh, it's ready made. So I really like that.
That's a great idea. I love that. I've never tried it, but it's one of those things that I've always seen, and I'm like, I need to try that one day. So maybe this workshop will inspire me to give that a try.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
So two things I want to say. Now is a good time. I know. Thank you to everybody that's been putting comments in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll mention one more here, but while we're doing that, I also want to give folks the opportunity to ask questions verbally too.
Oh,
over your microphone. So if you're calling in or participating with a computer or a phone that has the ability to turn your microphone on, please get ready. If you hover your mouse over your screen, there should be a participants button. If you click the participants button, this little screen will pop up, and there should be a button that says raise hand. So if you raise your hand, if you push that button that says raise hand as an attendee, that's going to signal to me that you're interested in asking a question verbally, and I can go ahead and unmute you. Or if it's too hard for you to find that button, totally understand. Feel free to just put a note in the chat, say, hey, I have a question, and I'll unmute you as a participant. So while attendees are figuring that out, if anybody's interested in asking a question verbally. But before that, George did mention earlier, Jenny, that he ordered seeds for something called holy basil, or also called tulsi. He said it's very, very medicinal. Do you know anything about, I know there's like sweet basil and a bunch of varieties of basil, but I've never heard of holy basil. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, if it is brought into like if you grow it in a pot, right, and then bring it in, you can keep it as kind of like a semi-perennial, going throughout. I have a friend who's had it going for about 6 years, but you have to be able to have a spot you can bring it in for it protected and then put it back out. Otherwise, it becomes more of an annual. And there are different uses for it, but the drying and everything would be exactly the same. Sweet basil is going to be more your culinary. The tulsi really is more on the herbal medicinal end than the culinary end. But if you look, like there's a Reuben basil, which is like the dark purple. It's gorgeous. Not only is it just beautiful as an annual landscape plant, but it's very tasty. And then you have your Thai basils. Again, are going to be an annual. The Thai basils are going to be an annual for you, but they are also super easy to grow and very tasty. So
very cool. Yeah, I'm currently doing an experiment with, is it Genoese basil versus basil, kind of some common ones there.
Yep.
So we do have, it looks like, well, maybe Clarissa had her hand up, but then she put it down. So I'm going to say that was maybe her testing it. So Clarissa, if you do have a question, feel free to push that button again, but if not, that's okay too. Other than that, I haven't seen anybody raise their hand. So from my perspective, that means you did a great job answering all the questions.
Yay! So I do have a smattering of herbs here. So I've got some rosemary here. And I just want to show how to cut it, and then you take the leaves off really quick. So this is a young guy, so he's in a little pot. My other rosemary has been planted in the ground. He's a happy guy. But I have some scissors, and this is the new growth right here. You can see that other way, new growth there. It's very tender, it's very soft. If you are harvesting rosemary and it's an established plant, you're going to want to harvest that new growth. You're going to harvest that really tender stuff, because that's where the potency is going to be the highest. So you're going to clip. I'm going to clip right in between because I want it to bush out. And so you'll see that when you look at it, you've got two little guys here that could grow out and spread that rosemary a little bit more. So you're going to want to cut right at the space in between those two, and then clip it off. I'm going to clip a little guy. And then if this was dry, I would tip it upside down, hold the tip, and then if it's dry, you just use your fingers and you pop them off. I even got a couple to come off. But if it's really dry, all those leaves, when you brush up like this and you hold that tip, they're gonna fall right off. It's so easy to get rosemary to come off. Really easy. Like you could be sitting and watching TV and then just like
harvesting all your rosemary. Your house smells great.
yeah, and then the whole house smells fantastic. This is lemon verbena. So it has they have really big leaves. They're really long, mostly used for tea, a little bit for cooking. But same idea, you're gonna cut, because lemon verbena is an annual, you're gonna cut it basically all the way down, unless you wanna harvest it a couple of times. Here, I'll show you. I can get really close in here. See, I don't know, maybe I can't. There's a couple little babies on there. I don't know if you can see those, but there's a little baby. So I would cut all the way back to where I see a little bit of new growth. Oh yeah, you can see that little guy right there. Cut all the way back, and then I'm gonna get some new growth coming from that guy there. So I would cut all the way down, dry out this long top before it flowers, because these have really beautiful flowers. You can see the top here is starting to get the little flower heads on it. Let it dry, and again, the same thing. You're just going to use your fingers, and you're going to have it come all the way down. But lemon verbena tends to be an annual, but we've had a really mild winter, so you know, I know the one at the EnviroHouse, I was super jealous, because the one at the EnviroHouse is still alive and it looks really good. Mine went with the winter, but the one Janda has at the EnviroHouse looks really cool. And then I have this the oregano. Now you can see, like, oregano, it grows really low. It's a low grower, right? So again, it's gonna get medium high, maybe 12 inches high, and it's something really nice to put down as a ground cover, because it spreads and it's gonna root itself in all these little spots that it spreads out to. And it hasn't flowered out yet, but you're gonna do the exact same thing. You're just gonna cut it back. You're gonna cut it back where it V's off, and where you're gonna see a little bit of new growth, and then let it dry, and then use your fingers and you know, rub it backwards, and it'll be just fine. It'll be super easy to harvest. I can show you one example. I have some back here, and they are lemon balm. And with mints and lemon balms, anything in that type of family, you know, catnip, catmint, you are going to want to dry it upside down. You're not gonna, or with leaves flat, not touching, and then put it in a dehydrator or put it in your refrigerator in between paper towels. Now, if you let it dry upwards like this, what happens is that your leaves are gonna turn black. And it means all of the oils have been oxidized. And when they turn black, they're no longer useful. So you really, if you are gonna hang and dry your lemon balms or your mints, really make sure that you're hanging them upside down. And I just tie a little bit of twine on there, and I hook it, and I have some hanging back there, and you can see they're still green. They haven't been oxidized, and so they're in good shape. But if you don't use a dehydrator and you want to do the mints, you're going to want to dry them upside down. That's a big one.
Very cool. Jenny, we have one more question. George would like to know. He's hearing some conflicting information about oregano. He wants to know if you could talk a little bit about the different types of oregano, and maybe clear up some of that conflict. I'm not sure what the specifics of the conflicts are, but
yeah, I'd love to know if he can turn on his audio and let me know what the conflicting info is there.
Yeah, George, if you want to do that, or just put it in the chat. But Jenny, if you just want to start with, are there different types of oregano? If so, how many?
Yes. I don't know how many, but you have definitely perked my interest. Most of the ones you're going to find at a nursery are going to be your common oregano that I have here. This little guy. This is your common oregano, and then there's Greek oregano. The there's basically two that most nurseries are going to sell. It's going to be the common and it's going to be the Greek. Greek does not sell as fast as the common. So when you go out, go quick in March and April and get the common if you want it. Otherwise, it's just going to be Greek. The Greek oregano really is more deciduous. Like you'll see that it will die back a lot. Your standard oregano is, again, it's going to be semi-evergreen. Like mine will lose like 25% of its leaves, and the leaves will look a little bit darker. The leaves that stay are going to change. They change color, and as soon as we get good weather, it just bushes out again. It becomes really lush. So it really kind of, it's not going to be an evergreen, but both are perennial. It's just the Greek is going to have more of a potential to die back. So there's a few that are there. I know that there's another oregano, and it is just for decorative purposes. The flavor is really awful, and right now I can't think of what it's called. But
it tastes terrible. Maybe you should look at the label and see if it's.
I know. Yeah.
Well, good, Jenny. I think with that, I had no takers on raising their hand to ask verbally. That's okay. Fine with me. Like I said, when there's no questions or, this few questions, that usually means you did a great job presenting. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see, cancel this. And I'm going to ask Janda to unmute herself as well, because I think unless, Jenny, you have anything else you want to wrap up, I see no more chats. Jenny, do you have a few closing words you want to say?
Before she does, Jenny, before you do that.
Go for it, Janda.
The cilantro, when we did this at the workshop, and I can't remember if it was you or Travis that said it, he said that a cilantro will bolt easily, and if, excuse me, if you're not eating it regularly, not using it regularly, cut it back anyway, even if you don't save it and dry it, because it will last longer.
Yeah.
It is good advice.
Yes, it is very good advice, unless you're looking for some coriander and then let it go to seed, and then you'll get some really great coriander. But that's so true. Like if you want cilantro to stick around a lot longer, then you are definitely going to want to trim that back. I do see in a chat from Janet, just the common. It's the common oregano. Absolutely.
Yeah, Janet's asking if I'm going to butcher the Latin name. The Oreganum vulgare or vulgar is the common oregano, maybe the Latin term for oregano. Yeah. It sounds like yes, that is.
Yeah, that's just the common oregano. There is one herb that I did not talk about, and it's lovage.
Oh.
Lovage is fantastic. It does get quite large, so it does need to be one that goes either in a raised bed or in the ground. But it's a perennial, so it'll pop back up every year. It dies back every year, and it pops back up. It's herbaceous. But if you don't want to grow celery, lovage is a wonderful, comparable flavor. The leaves are great in soups. They dry really nicely. So you could dry the leaves and have some lovage on hand in fall soups. So lovage is a fun one. So.
Very cool. I Googled lovage as we were talking, and I put a Food Network link in the chat to lovage and the ways that you can use it. So very cool. I'd never heard of lovage before.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not the only one, but maybe I am the only one. I'd never heard of borage before. What could you talk just for a second about borage?
So with borage, you can eat the flowers. You can dry the flowers and then eat them later. A lot of times folks use the root in borage. And it's used like an mostly herbal medicinal, but you can eat, you can dry the leaves and use those later. You can eat them in salad. You can, borage is kind of cool. It can get 4 feet tall. Most of the time it stops at about 3 foot, 3.5 feet, has a tall stalk, beautiful purple flowers. It's very showy. It's very, very showy in early summer.
Very cool. Well, I looked up borage, and again, I'm reading it on the internet, so it has to be true that borage is native to the Middle East and was used in ancient wars as an enhancement for bravery and courage. So with what you will.
There you go. Yeah, you have a challenge, have some borage.
Oh, there you go. Maybe we should all be doing that in this kind of time, it's worth a shot, Yeah. Well, let's see it. Maybe there's one more. I see a Q&A here.
Okay.
Might have already touched on this. Teresa asked about cilantro that has already bolted. How can she harvest the coriander seed?
Yeah, that's great. So the coriander seed, you're gonna have to wait till it flowers out, and then kind of like chives in a way that you let it dry completely on the stalk. So that plant is going to look miserable by the by the end, but you really, if you can, you're going to want to let that flower head dry completely, and then it shouldn't take too much energy to then tip the heads and shake the seeds. They might stick a little bit, and at that point you can just bring it in. You can just take the hulls off indoors, but you're really going to want to let it dry completely on the stalk. Keep watering it and everything until it flowers. It'll flower. Water it for another week or two after the flowers have gone away, so the seeds can really bulk up. Really get a lot of nutrients to those seeds, to the coriander, and then kind of just leave it alone and let it dry out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely pun intended here. Seasoned herb growers would have already known this. But again, I am not a big cilantro eater, so I'm embarrassed to say I did not realize that cilantro and coriander were the same family, let alone the same plant, until the last couple of years. So
isn't that cool?
Yeah, very cool. Kind of a double whammy, though, if you're fans of either or both of those herbs. Yeah. Well, I think that's the last Q&A that I saw. Last thing I've seen in the chat. So, Jenny, anything else? Otherwise, Janda?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it, Janda.
No, well, you just do your little farewell there and you'll be back.
Yeah.
And Jenny just did how-to videos for us on container planting, and we're trying to take some of those videos and break them down into shorter segments so that they can be on Tacoma's TV channel on Urban Green.
Yeah.
So if you're in Tacoma and you get that channel, that's another place that you can see those, or you can go to YouTube and do search on EnviroHouse how-to playlist, and you can pull those up. Hal Ming, who I think is still on the chat, Hal will be doing some how-to videos the end of the month with us on preserving dehydrating. He's not going to cover a whole lot on the dehydrating and the process, but he'll talk a little bit about dehydrating, and then he'll have recipes on how to make dehydrated foods for backpacking or emergency kits. So we'll have those available. And we are planning more workshops. We'll be having one on electric vehicles coming up, and the heat pump one that I mentioned. And if you have ideas on others that you would like us to do, particularly the gardening and that sort of thing, since it's the season, let us know either through the emails that Leah sends out, or you can email ehouse@cityoftacoma.org. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Janda. I put a link to the workshop website in the chat at cityoftacoma.org/workshops. Marty, real quick right here at the end, said maple sap harvesting. So maybe a future, we'll have to brainstorm about that. Marty says he's been doing that for the last few years. So maybe a new fall, autumn season EnviroHouse workshop upcoming. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. That'll close out our workshop this evening. Jenny and Janda, I'm going to ask you both to stay on the call, but I'm going to stop our videos. And with that, everybody, thanks for joining. Feel free to sign off. And again, keep an eye on your email inboxes. We'll be sending some resources to you via email. So with that, thank you everybody. And I'm going to
thank you.
off and feel free to click that red end button. Thanks again, everyone.